I guess you think I made the right decision, the right choice?
What a week it's been in Wisconsin politics. We'll break down election results and dig a little deeper into Paul Ryan's candidacy for vice president this morning on For the Record. Good morning, I'm Neil Heinen. We start with the most obvious results of the last week, and that is Wisconsin is a player. Within a week, Governor Scott Walker's star role at the Republican convention was upstaged by Congressman Paul Ryan's nomination to run for vice president with Mitt Romney. Then there's Tommy Thompson and Mark Pocan in our area, and we'll get right to it with UW political scientist Ken Mayer and Wisconsin State Journal editorial page editor Scott Milfred. Although I guess we should start, those of you who watched this show last week might have a hard time recognizing Ken Mayer. He looks a little different. This was not a style statement.
No, it was support for my cousin who's fighting breast cancer for the third time, and her sisters had all done locks of love. I couldn't do that because I'm hair challenged, and I thought, why not shave my head?
Shave it off. Well, that's really nice, and I thought we should let people know. Milfred and I come by it naturally, so there's there's nothing we can do there. Paul Ryan, I want your initial thoughts, given that we've had a week now to mull it over. What do you think?
It's interesting. Conservatives, Republicans have been arguing for years that what they need is a real conservative, and John McCain wasn't it, Mitt Romney's not it. Now they've got one. Ryan is not the most conservative member of the House, but he's in the top 35 or so, and he also, I think, is more engaged on policy than a lot of the other possibilities, and so I think that there's going to be some real engagement on some important issues. And it's obviously interesting for us here because it puts Wisconsin at the center of this.
Oh yeah. You know, Paul. I mean,
what's different about Paul? I think you're right. Is I saw a headline. I think it was yesterday online somewhere. It was Paul Ryan, ideologue or problem solver, and he's kind of both, and that doesn't neatly fit. But he does have. He's a very pure conservative on fiscal matters, on trying to help individuals who actually need help but otherwise staying out of the way, and on trying to fix the financial problems in this country. But what he's better at than so many of those other real conservative people is in talking to moderates and even talking to liberals about how he wants to do that. I think he's better at communicating that. I think he brings more heft to the ticket. And the other thing is that so many conservatives are stuck on the social issues, and that really turns off a lot of moderates like me. And Ryan, that's, he's socially conservative, but that's not what drives him. That's not where he spends his time. He endorsed Representative Kirk, a Republican down in suburban Chicago, for example, a couple years ago. And Kirk was for gay marriage, he was pro-choice, but Ryan called him a policy entrepreneur. So that's kind of how Paul thinks, and it's fiscal is what he's about, I think.
Now, there can be a lot of effort to try to hang that social conservative label on him, certainly from the left. Can he just simply refuse to engage in that?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's because his positions are very, very conservative, but so far it's been below the radar. It's not something that he has engaged in or put to the forefront. But the kind of scrutiny you get as a vice presidential candidate is much, much greater than a typical member of Congress or even the chair of the House Budget Committee. And so I think his response will be something what Scott said, that he has his principles, but one of the things that struck me about him is this was something that I think Feingold was very good at. Feingold was very liberal on a lot of things, but I think people got the sense that they could sit down with him and have a conversation. Even if they disagreed, that you would be able to have a dialogue instead of, here's my position, anybody who disagrees with me is wrong and a bad person. I don't think Ryan gives off that sense.
So whose budget will it be on this ticket? Is it going to be the Ryan budget? Is it going to be the Romney budget? Is it going to be some hybrid?
I think it's a political hybrid, and they try to stay away from the more negative things, particularly with older voters. But at the end of the day, it's Romney's, it's not his, and I think Paul will have to adjust some of what he's saying and what he's for to match. But on the other hand, I think Romney's really going to let him be more of a point person on this issue of all this debt, and we need to do something for our kids and our grandkids, and so that's what I think. It's a hybrid.
Because that's his real value to the ticket, right? I mean, the less that you hear about the Ryan budget, the less the conservatives who are cheering right now get excited about the ticket.
Well, except that the Ryan budget refers to the path to prosperity, the several budget resolutions that he put forth as chair of the House Budget Committee. It is not extremely detailed. It is in some regard. Fairly specific plans about what to do with certain types of discretionary spending. A fairly specific plan for what to do with Medicare. Yep. But most of the other, Social Security, some of the other entitlement programs, really very general and kicking the can down the road. Some of the Social Security proposals that Congress and the President should sit down and put something together and present that to Congress. But at least we're having a conversation about that. And I think Biden, apparently, I saw that he was at a diner and he promised some of the people that there would be absolutely no changes to Social Security. I just don't think that's realistic. It seems pretty clear that both of those programs are going to have to change, and we need to have a debate about how to do that.
It's interesting because if you're both right, and I think you are, that would answer the question about whether Ryan is all in at such a young age on the national stage. This could be seen as a referendum on his political philosophy, on his budget philosophy, and that if he loses, if he's repudiated, if they lose to Obama, that would be a heck of a blow for him to absorb.
It could be, but I still think he's well positioned. I mean, if it doesn't appear, maybe it's mostly because of the economy. It's also because Obama now has a record. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be the blowout that it was 4 years ago for Obama. So it's going to be a tighter race no matter what. And I think, let's say, Ryan and Romney lose, I would think Ryan 4 years from now would be, right up in those top 2 or 3 that people are talking about.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a referendum on Ayn Rand or the Austrian economics school. There are lots of other issues that are involved, and certainly the Obama campaign will attempt to frame Ryan in that regard as a very scary, arch, unreasonable conservative. But he's a young guy. People have been talking about him as trying to get him to run for governor. His career is not over, even though he's going to probably have to give up his House seat, I would think.
Yeah.
But this is not a career topper for him.
Yeah. All right, we'll circle back to this, but when we come back, we'll talk about Tuesday's primary election right after this.
Ladies and gentlemen, Wisconsin is on a roll.
The one and the only. Governor Tommy Thompson, now a candidate for the United States Senate. Ken Mayer, UW political scientist, is with me this morning, along with Scott Milfred, the editorial page editor of the Wisconsin State Journal. Scott, your analysis of the Republican primary on Tuesday?
Well, I think that was Tommy's tougher race. He has a much easier time going to the middle than he does to the far right, and the Republican vote was split up 4 ways. Arguably, all 3 of the others were more conservative than Thompson was. All younger, all fresher for the most part. But the Tommy legacy, the Tommy magic, if you want to call it that, he was able to get enough, and he was able to present himself as a true conservative and gloss over a lot of what he's done in the past, and it worked for him.
Yeah.
You and I talked about this, Ken. It looked as if he wasn't getting a lot of high-paid strategic advice. He was running his own race.
Yeah, I mean,
and that could have gone either way. But in this race with those four guys, it worked. Right?
I think it's pretty clear that if any one of those three, even Fitzgerald, who came in fourth, certainly if Hovde or Newman had not run, I think Thompson would have had a much tougher time. 34% of the vote is not even much of a plurality, and he barely beat Hovde. But I think Scott's right that the general election, all of the polls show him up on Baldwin by a few percentage points, although there's obviously a great deal that can change between now and November.
So just as we sit here right now, does Tommy move back towards the center?
Well, he's got to be careful, because I was thinking about these results this morning, that the Tea Party is less apparent in Wisconsin than it is in a lot of states. There were a couple of, I think, state legislative candidates who had the backing of the Tea Party, even though that's not really a thing. It's just a group of people, I think. But he can't move, I think, too far to the center, because if you alienate your base, and people who subscribe to the Tea Party ideology, I think, are very active and very attentive, that could hurt him. And in a close race where the margin is 1 or 2 percentage points, just about everything can make a difference.
Yeah, I did see him speak at that first kind of big Tea Party rally when they were thinking he might run. He was thinking he might run against Feingold, if you remember that. Ron Johnson spoke at that rally too, and Tommy really got him fired up. I mean, he's good at Wisconsin and talking about Wisconsin, but I think you're right that he has that disconnect with the Tea Party, and there's this sense that, you know, his time may have passed him by, and that he doesn't quite recognize all of his foot soldiers anymore, and he can't appeal to them quite the same way. But I have to say, at that rally, he was great.
Yeah.
So Tammy pushes him as far right as she can.
Well, and she's going to try to move to the middle too, and I think, you know, she has a softer image. I mean, so does Tommy than a lot of his opponents did. But a lot of people, you know, we know who Tommy is, and here in Dane County, I think we know who Tammy Baldwin is. But most of the state doesn't really know who Tammy Baldwin is. So, you know, that there's a difficulty there, but there's also an opportunity where potentially she can shape her image as more of somebody who's strong for more people, old people, young people, and that she's not this Madison lefty that she'll be painted as.
At this point, Congresswoman Baldwin has agreed to 3 debates just to start the conversation. I don't think Tommy's agreed to any at this point, but I don't know that he's thought about it. But it strikes me as being some pretty interesting contrasts in style, you know, if nothing else.
That's definitely true. Tammy is much younger. She has been a lot more engaged in, I think, the full range of policy than Thompson, who was Secretary of Health and Human Services, but has essentially been out of politics for almost a decade. And it's going to be what that race could shape up is a debate between Baldwin on policy and Thompson on his connection to the state and his legacy. I think the debates will be very interesting.
Do you assume that the national parties look at this race a little differently now, with Ryan on the ticket and with Wisconsin being so important, that they're both going to spend money? I mean,
I think that's true. I mean, the Democrats are playing defense this cycle in the Senate because they're defending many more seats than the Republicans. But now with Ryan on the ticket, it becomes a matter of, apart from the concrete importance of having a Republican senator for them, because they're trying to recapture control of the chamber, I think there's a lot of symbolic importance to trying to win the state for both Ryan and Romney and Thompson. Obviously, the elections will be different, but I think if Republicans lose both of those, that will not be a terrific thing for the prestige of their operation.
And all of the national attention has been on Scott Walker and Paul Ryan and the recall, basically conservative politics in this state. And yet I don't think a lot of people realize how hard it is for Republicans to carry Wisconsin in the presidential race.
Yeah, there is sort of a misperception because this whole thing has been rolling. You know, we in the news business, we keep thinking we're going to get a breather and we don't get one. And the whole thing keeps rolling and rolling. And from people I talk to out of state, I think there is a misperception that we're not purple, that we weren't deep blue, that we're somehow now red, and there might be a little overconfidence out there among some of the national people.
Ken, your analysis of Mr. Hovde and Mr. Newman and how they ran?
Well, in a way, it was almost a standard set of candidates where you had the longtime politician Thompson, Hovde, who was a newcomer but had deep pockets, who otherwise I don't think wouldn't have come in second, and you had Mark Newman, who has been out of public office for a while, and this was clearly a long shot for him. But it shaped up as essentially a two and a half candidate race along the lines of what you would normally expect to see with a popular ex-governor, a deep-pocketed political amateur. And sometimes it's a function of money, sometimes it's a function of the strengths that the candidates bring. I mean, Hovde put in an enormous amount of money, was on the air much more than Thompson was, at least
Yep.
here in Madison. And I think for that kind of effort, it was a decent showing, although he would regard that as terribly disappointing because he didn't win.
Yep. In his concession speech, Eric Hovde said, "That's it, he's done." Do you believe him?
I'm not sure. You know, sometimes people catch that bug. They like the politics and they jump back in even though they say they aren't going to do it anymore. I mean, look at Tommy Thompson. He wasn't going to do it, now he's going to do it. So I'm not so sure about that. I think that he was the fresh face, and the strategy was sort of the Ron Johnson strategy. You're the fresh face, the young guy. You're the Tea Party guy. He tried to be. They all tried to be. But in the end, it just didn't work for him, and I think to some degree not being here the way Ron Johnson had been here for so long, I think hurt him. I think he was easier to tag as this rich guy who's been out east.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we're going to talk about what we expect here in Wisconsin in the next couple of months right when we come back right after this. UW-Madison political scientist Ken Mayer and Wisconsin State Journal editorial page editor Scott Milfred joined me this morning as we look back at the week in politics. And what a week it was. We should at least talk about the local race for Congress. You were one of the people that questioned the candidates. That we ran that show last week on For the Record, and I was there to moderate it. It looked like a pretty competitive race for a while there, but the results I thought were really quite amazing.
Well, the magnitude of Pocan's win, I think, was a little bit surprising, only in the sense that Roy's running essentially as an incumbent with a high name recognition. Normally you would expect people in that position to do somewhat better than, I think, 22% of the vote. But Mark is a very popular, very experienced politician in Madison, and in that sense, it was not all that surprising. I mean, not surprising that he won. I think it's surprising that he won by that kind of margin.
I wouldn't fault Roy's for going negative. I mean, I think you could interpret those results and say that was rejected, that the establishment and most voters in Dane County said, we didn't like that, and so in the end, probably fewer voters voted for her because of that. But I think going into it, she didn't have a chance as just, I'm a nice person like Mark, I agree with him on everything and vote for me. I mean, I think she knew that it was his race to lose. He was way ahead, and she had to shake it up. And she tried to shake it up. She had to shake it up. It didn't work.
Yeah, I think that campaign clearly was a Hail Mary pass, because she had, if that worked, then she would have been competitive, but it didn't work.
Did you talk to all 4 candidates by any chance?
No.
I think it just bears noting that Dennis Hall and Matt Silverman were 2 great examples of citizen candidates for office. They added a lot.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting in the debate, because particularly, I think, both of them, when you have no chance of winning, you're free to say what you think is right, as opposed to what you think voters want to hear.
Yeah.
Those candidates are always so good. I like them, and they never have a chance.
Yeah.
But some of that's for good reason. You do have to prove yourself. You do need to get some experience.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you expect we're going to see here? Wisconsin, one of probably a handful of states, right, that it will be a real battleground.
I think our state is much more in play with Ryan. I think he adds more in Wisconsin to the ticket, and I think they're going to be more aggressive going for the state. Now, if the polls don't improve in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, if they don't get much of a bump, then maybe they pull out. I mean, if you remember the last time, McCain was in for a while and then he pulled out and you didn't see anybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're going for it now, whereas before I think they were wondering whether they should.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the polls right now have President Obama up by 5 or 6 percentage points, which makes it leans Democratic, not solidly Democratic. And my colleague Charles Franklin said that having a vice presidential candidate on the ticket from your state is probably worth a point or 2 in the polls. Mm-hmm. But there are other bigger prizes this cycle: Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Florida. But my prediction is that we will continue to see lots of campaign advertising.
Okay, well, we're going to be doing more of this. So we're going to be watching the stubble grow back. Thanks, guys. We're going to come back and wrap up For the Record right after this. My thanks again to Ken and Scott. I'll see you next week on For the Record.